lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha! I'm the innocent bystander. Somehow I got stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm down on my luck. Yes, I'm down on my luck. Well, I'm down on my luck. I'm hiding in Honduras. I'm a desperate man. Send lawyers, guns, and money. The shit has hit the fan. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Send lawyers, guns, and money.
Okay, well, that was, of course, the great Warren Zevon. And who among us has not gotten that call at 3 a.m. every once in a while? Send lawyers, guns, and money. Welcome, everybody. This is the launch event for Third Act Lawyers. We're so glad to have you all with us. And we're looking forward to, I hope, a very interesting and inspirational, perhaps, evening. My name's Pat Allman-Rode. I'm one of the folks that's been trying to get this group stood up, and it's great to see so many of you here. I'm going to give a little bit of sort of lay of the land, and then we'll hear from Third Act's founder, Bill McKibben, and then I'll be back to introduce our presenters. So just want to let you know a few things about how we're going to be proceeding tonight. We are recording, so just be aware of that. You can put questions in the chat as we go. We'll try to address them as we go. Otherwise, we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the whole evening. And let's see, I think that's about all that I have to say about those kind of procedural things. So Bill, if you're ready, take it away.
I'm ready. And not only am I ready, I'm incredibly moved to be with you all. I know how hard people have been working to get off the ground and going. And I know how much I've been anticipating it. You know, Third Act is about a year old now. We're still in our infancy, but I was finishing up a piece with Akia Winwood, our lead advisor for the New York Times. It'll be out on Sunday, I think. Just talking about, in some ways, what a remarkable journey the last year has been. I think it's become very clear that our initial impression that there were a lot of people our age ready to go to work to do what needs to be done just turned out to be completely true. The response has been pretty overwhelming. And one of the most fascinating parts has been watching people figure out how to start using the things that they've spent their life doing in order to for the common good. Um, I am I'm I'm kind of moved just to think about, with all the people on this call, the number of briefs that have been written, depositions taken, on and on and on over the course of a lifetime, the sheer amount of intellectual uh, ability and practice and things that people have. And now that y'all will be figuring out some ways to put that to use at a time, and this is the really important part for me, when it couldn't be more needed. I mean, lawyers are always a necessary part of any society. Um, I know that, that sometimes we think of them as a necessary evil part of any society, but there you are. But right at the moment, they've never been a kind of sense of, um, well, the skills of lawyers have never been needed more, because we're at a moment when it's not at all clear, for the first time in my lifetime, that we're going to remain a nation of laws. Um, the last few years have been sobering and scary in lots of ways, and those are the things that Third Act is determined to stand up against. We've focused our work on protecting the physical climate and protecting the political climate. And I hear people saying that they can't quite hear me, and I'm sorry. I've been talking all day, and I'll try and talk louder because I want to be heard. Protecting the physical climate and the political climate are hard, hard tasks right now, but we can do them. We have the skills to do them, and we have, after a lifetime of this work, the muscle memory about how to do this and what needs to happen. And I know that you guys will figure out extraordinary things to be doing, things that are in service to all the other projects that we've got underway at Third Act, this huge campaign about banks that's underway now, the electoral work and democracy protection work. But I also know that you guys will figure out things to do that we haven't even thought of yet, because we don't know the world where you have spent your lives and understand what the possibilities, pitfalls, potentials are for extraordinary change. So just the prospect of what this working group is going to accomplish over the next 4 or 5 years um, um, makes me truly, truly, truly excited. And as I say, truly moved that you're willing to give that skill that you've spent a lifetime acquiring on behalf of the rest of us, on behalf of the larger physical world endangered as it's never been before, on behalf of our political world endangered as it's never been before. Um, that's a very, very special gift for which we are extraordinarily grateful. And we've launched in the last few months the educators working group and the healthcare working group and the faith working group for retired ministers and rabbis and things. And each one of them has brought their own skill, their own sense of the world, their own set of networks and connections to bear. Um, Between us all, we know how to do everything. And we are going to figure out how to knit that everything together in ways that protect what's best about the world that we've known, and that change the world in other ways that it has to change to adapt to the problems that we face. So I could not be more um, more grateful. I don't even quite have the words to say it. Just thank you enormously for all that you've already done in the course of your lives and work, and for all that you will do in the time ahead. we are going to cause some good trouble, and we're going to have some good fun doing it. And I really just look forward enormously to working shoulder to shoulder with you all. So, Pat, back to you with special thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate it. And just to echo some of the things Bill said, we have, I think, tremendous potential in this group. Tonight, we're going to be talking about ways that we can interface with other organizations that are already doing legal work in the climate
sound.
So we're going to be talking tonight about other groups or with other groups that are already doing work in the legal space, in the climate space, legal work in the climate space. But as Bill said, the other part of Third Act's portfolio is democracy. I always like to tell people we're tackling the easy stuff, climate and democracy. That's not going to be so much our focus tonight, but I know that that's a concern of lots, if not all of us here. And I invite everybody to pitch in with ideas in both of those realms, climate and democracy. They're both so important, and they're both things that we have ways to work on. So with that, I think it's probably time for me to introduce our first presenter, and that's Matt Dos Santos. Matt is the general counsel and managing attorney at Our Children's Trust. And I'm sure some of you know that Our Children's Trust is on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge, perhaps, of actual climate litigation. Matt currently oversees the legal program at Our Children's Trust, which brings climate litigation on behalf of youth in federal and state courts in the United States and in tribunals across the globe. Prior to joining Our Children's Trust, Matt served as the legal director at the ACLU of Oregon. And I'm sure he'll tell you more about himself if he wants to, but otherwise, Matt, take it away.
Thanks so much, Pat, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to just put a little bit of information in the chat that that y'all can take a look at while I talk. If this works, I hope it will. Maybe it won't. Hold on one second. Okay, here it is. There. So I won't have any slides for you today. I know we only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to go through this quickly. I was just very incredibly excited when Seth and Pat approached me about this idea of the Lawyers Working Group. Look, you're here because you know the planet is in trouble. And in the US, we find ourselves trying to fight this existential crisis with the backdrop of, as Bill said, increasing attacks on our democracy and frankly on our court system. And I'm not going to make any bones about it. This project that Third Act and the rest of my colleagues on the panel find ourselves engaged in, I think I can say with confidence, is the most important legal project that we could engage in today. And before I go into my very short presentation, I have a litany of thank yous for Bill and Third Act. First and foremost, thank you, Bill and Third Act members for endorsing actions and joining in-person press conferences to support our youth-led cases around the country and globally. And then, Bill, thank you again for co-delivering that November 2021 organizational letter to the DOJ. With a youth leader, Jerome Foster, on behalf of 167 organizations in support of Juliana versus United States youth plaintiffs. That letter was important because it urged DOJ to stop fighting the Juliana youth. And it also was a springboard to garnering 48 members of Congress to join Senator Merkley and Representative Jones in a letter to Biden to support fundamental rights to children in a safe climate. So the work that Third Act is doing is just so important to our work already. So for those of you who don't know about us generally, Our Children's Trust is a nonprofit public interest law firm. We provide strategic campaign-based legal services to youth. These youth are from diverse backgrounds and with the intention of securing their legal rights to a safe climate. we, at our core, we work to protect the Earth's climate system for present and future generations by representing these young people in global legal efforts to secure their binding and enforceable legal rights. Those two words are important: binding and enforceable legal rights to a healthy atmosphere and stable climate, and based on the best available science. That's also important, and so will show up in some of the things that I will say here in a minute. So what's happening right now at OCT? I'll just give you a couple highlights. As many of you are likely familiar, or at least some of you are likely familiar with our Juliana versus United States, our federal landmark case against the US government on behalf of 21 youth plaintiffs. That case is still ongoing, and we're waiting for a decision from Judge Aiken in the District of Oregon, which could come at any day. I'll talk a little bit more, and you can see a petition in the chat with information, or a link with information about signing a petition relating to that case. And so please check that out. And I understand that we're going to be sending a follow-up email to everybody who participates. At a state level, we have a first of its kind trial on the docket for June of this year in Helena, Montana. So if there are any folks in that area, we encourage you to join us in this summer. That case, we are working with partners Roger Sullivan at Garvey Law and Melissa Hornbein and Barbara Chilcott at Western Environmental Law Center, where we represent 16 young people in a constitutional climate lawsuit against the state of Montana, asserting that by supporting a fossil fuel-driven energy system, which is contributing to the climate crisis, Montana is violating their constitutional rights to a clean and healthy environment, to seek safety, health and happiness, and to individual dignity and equal protection of the law. These youth are also arguing that the state's fossil fuel energy system is degrading and depleting Montana's constitutionally protected public trust resources. And of course, for folks who know Montana, a picture of it is behind me. That includes all sorts of beautiful rivers and lakes, fish and wildlife, and the atmosphere, right? Because we need this air to breathe. So this historic trial is going to start on June 12th. 2023 in the First Judicial District Court in Helena, Montana, and will continue until June 23rd. And we expect that there'll be plenty of public events there that you can join in support. We also have a number of global cases that are being litigated with partner organizations and law firms in other countries around the world. But one little tidbit I wanted to share with you is that last month, OCT, along with our partners Oxfam and the Center for Child Law, which is based in the University of Pretoria, we submitted third-party interventions to the European Court of Human Rights in what is a first ever sort of the Grand Chamber taking a look at a bunch of first ever climate cases. So we in particular and our co-interveners submitted key scientific evidence that underscores the intertwined relationship between climate change and the violation of human rights, including information about our current level of planetary heating and how it's unsafe for individuals and communities, including the somewhat unpopular opinion that the temperature targets set in the 2015 Paris Agreement, aiming to limit heating to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, are inadequate to protect human rights across the world. And really urging that the best science and accurate science, including lowering the concentration of carbon dioxide to 350 parts per million, is essential to having a real robust human rights claim before the European Court. So that's just sort of the backdrop. So between Held versus the state of Montana and Juliana and our global work, we have what we think is going to be a gangbusters year ahead of us in 2023, and certainly could use your support. We're a pretty small organization. We have about 30 total staff. Pro bono legal work is a huge part of how we get stuff done. And there's a variety of ways that attorneys can get involved with our work. The highest level of involvement, of course, is being a partner attorney with OCT in your state jurisdiction. That could look like, for example, our co-counsel that came to us in Montana, right? Roger, Melissa, Barbara. They are working side by side with OCT, offering pro bono legal services, helping us litigate a case. That requires litigation expertise and a lot of time. And I know that's not for everyone. There are more project-based sort of one-off opportunities for those of you who, oh, this is great. I have resolved the dispute between of how you pronounce amicus or amicus. Our communications director today said, if you like it, it's an amicus. If you don't like it, it's an amicus. So I'm glad to report that, if nothing else, that's the contribution I've made tonight. And we have, so amicus briefing, or amicus briefing, I should say, because we like our friends of the court. We need folks to step in to help partner organizations draft amici for trial and appellate level courts. We're currently trying to help identify someone to draft a brief in Virginia about sovereign immunity, where our case was dismissed in a very strange way that has, I think, a lot of ripple effects for civil rights and civil liberties around the country, and certainly in Virginia. Professor Erwin Chemerinsky, who's a longtime supporter of our Children's Trust, will be involved in that, but we need someone to help write it. So that's the kind of thing you could do by participating with us in the amici arena. And also, if litigation and amicus briefing isn't your thing and you've got more experience in administrative proceedings, we certainly can use help responding to submitting comments, public comments. We occasionally submit them, typically at the federal level, though occasionally on the state level. And folks with a variety of different administrative backgrounds could be helpful in that area. We also have opportunities for people to help us craft policy. A lot of the policy thinking we do is behind the scenes, which we plug into our litigation. So it's a little bit lower pressure. There isn't public, you're not going to be publishing the work that you do necessarily, but it's really helpful for us as we think about our legal strategy. And, for example, we worked with an attorney in Seattle recently who helped us think through different pathways for NAAQS, the EPA regulation around ambient air quality standards. So we also have opportunities in Washington, D.C. for folks in Virginia and Maryland and the D.C. area to go and lobby elected officials like your representatives, and you could be in touch with us and our lobbyist about our DC based government attorney who is a lobbyist about those opportunities. I see that I'm almost out of time. The very quick actions that you can take, I would be remiss if I didn't say, please donate to our Children's Trust. As a small organization focused on litigation, almost all of our money comes from individual donors like you. This is a small but monumental way that you can help us, and you can donate right on the donate here link on our website. The other thing you can do is sign on as an individual or an organization to support our actions. I put into the chat a petition to tell Attorney General Garland to end DOJ opposition to youth climate justice. You can just see there's a bit.ly link in there. We have almost nearly 50,000 signatures. It would be wonderful to get over 50,000. And that is a significant, we're blown away by the support that we've gotten there. And we will send out a couple of other simple sort of like low-hanging fruit actions that you can take that are really big for us, but won't take very much of your time, and the follow-up email that Pat will send out. So thanks so much for giving me a few minutes to talk to you all, and it's really great to be here.
Matt, thank you so much. Really appreciate the work that you do. Let me just remind everybody, you're welcome to put questions in the chat. We can catch them as we go, or we can try to answer them at the end. Oh, Matt, I also wanted to thank you for resolving the whole amicus question. Now let's work on Dauber, Dober, Daubert, all of that stuff. Our next presenters are, and I'm sorry, I wanted to remind everybody also to save the chat. periodically, just hit those three dots on the bottom there, and it'll give you an option to save the chat. And that way you'll keep all of the information, but we will also be sending out a final email, a post-event email that will contain all the links and all of that stuff. So our next presenters are going to be introduced by Jane Kleckner, another member of Third Act Lawyers.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jane Kleckner, as Pat just said, and I am in the lawyers working group here at Third Act, and it's really exciting to have this launch event. And I'm very happy that Pat asked me to introduce our next speakers from the Sabin Center at Columbia University School of Law. And the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law is very instrumental in many ways with their director, Michael Gerard. So we're very fortunate to have these next two speakers come with us and give us some information about the work that they are doing with respect to climate change. So our first speaker will be Marcy Khan, and she is working with an organization that you may have heard of called Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization Project. And it is supported by the Sabin Center. So Judge Khan recently retired. She's a recently retired judge from the New York State United Court system. And she was an associate justice there in the appellate division. So she worked there for 32 years, a wonderful long career with the court system. And she recently retired in 2019. And she retired to do more advocacy work and take action, which is part of what Third Act is all about, acting, taking action. But her areas of focus include climate change, as well as human rights and the rule of law. So we can see the democracy overlays there with the concerns about rule of law. So I would just want to mention that also Judge Khan worked recently as 2019 to speak at the Pontifical Academy for the Social Sciences at a judges summit on social rights, environment, and social justice held at the Vatican. So with that, a little bit of interesting background, I'll turn it over to Judge Khan. And I guess I'll come back to introduce our other speaker from the Sabin Center. Thank you, Judge Khan.
Thank you very much, Jane. And thanks also to the Third Act for inviting us here today. We're happy to be here. I'm going to provide an overview of the Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization Project and how it operates. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and I'm going to, at least I think I am, sort of, I don't know why this is, I don't know why I'm having a little bit of trouble here.
This is Hypatia. So we can see your screen.
But I'm trying to move to the second slide, and I'm not having good luck doing that. So let me just, I know what I have. Well, I don't know what I have to do.
Maybe
let me just go back and start it again here. Okay, and screen sharing stop. Okay, I'm going to go back to share my screen here, and I'm going to do my slideshow. Whoops, there we are from the beginning. And I think I should be able to do this now. There we go. Okay, thank you. And I didn't mean to worry you, Hypatia. Okay, so I'm going to start by describing the project, the LPDD project. We draft model laws to address climate change and make them available to legislators at every level of government. And the whole goal is to decarbonize all sectors of the energy economy. The project involves dozens of law firms and individual lawyers who are already participating as drafters or peer reviewers or assisting in outreach. All of the work that we all do is done pro bono. The model laws that we draft are based on recommendations from a book called Legal Pathways to Deep Decarbonization in the United States, which was edited by Professor Michael Gerard and Professor John Dernbach. And it's really a playbook of state, local, federal, and private legal options to enable the US to reduce US greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. The book has 35 chapters written by some 60 authors, each of whom is an expert in their field. Each chapter covers a specific sector of the energy economy and discusses how to decarbonize that sector. So some examples of the energy economy and by sector that we use are energy generation, transportation, agriculture, new and existing buildings, and various other sectors. So here's the book. You can get it from the Environmental Law Institute for $65. And it contains 1,500 recommendations on how to decarbonize in the United States and addresses legal actions to do that. So each chapter has its own recommendations. Some have to do with state suggestions, adopting legislation to encourage energy efficient appliances, have cities adopt efficient city building codes that are energy efficient. These two slides give you some examples of the kinds of things we do. We also have suggestions that companies with high shipping volumes could improve their supply chain requirements, and we have ways to encourage them or require them to decarbonize. So as you can see, our suggestions are at every governmental level. We have a need to take these suggestions or recommendations from the book and turn them into model laws. And that's what our volunteers do, our volunteer drafters. And once they do that, these model laws are available for policymakers, legislators, and anybody else who want to use them. We launched our website in April of 2020. That's lpdd.org. I encourage you to go there. You'll see what we do there. We have drafters create the model laws, and we get them peer reviewed, and we post them on the website. And we have now some just about 65 model laws. We also have hundreds of additional laws and resources on the website addressing climate mitigation, which really is a terrific tool for anyone who's doing climate change research. So I'm going to show you a diagram of the process of how we work. Drafters select a recommendation from the book, and then they undertake initial background research. You don't have to be an expert in the area in order to take on a recommendation and research it and try to draft a model law about it. The first step involves the drafter preparing a 1 to 2 page document that summarizes the model law and sets out a timeline for drafting. We call this our template. Once the template is approved, then the drafter prepares a draft of the model law. And as I say, we make sure that we have peer reviewers review the model law before we post it on our website. We have at this point some 90 peer reviewers, each of whom is an expert in his or her field. And in some instances, we may have more than one peer reviewer. But now who are the peer reviewers? Well, they could very well be you. You could bring your expertise. They include law professors, industry lawyers, financial experts, present and former government officials, advocates from NGOs, engineers, and a few of the chapter authors themselves. Each has a deep involvement in their respective fields. We have 4 principal guidelines for our peer reviewers. We follow the recommendations of the LPDD book. We're not coming up with new ideas particularly, unless, of course, technology or legal developments have changed such that the book, which was published in 2019, is a bit outdated. We strive to have a significant impact on decarbonization in each of our model laws. We offer proposals which have some sort of political viability as legislation. We don't want to be recommending something that has been rejected many times. And we ask our peer reviewers to take a common sense approach and work toward enhancing the proposal as provided by the drafter. We're not asking anybody to reinvent the wheel. So our protocol for the peer review process, and we have a protocol for the drafting process as well, provides that on the completion of the drafting process, the drafter sends the model bill and an explanatory memo in, and we, my colleague Rick Horsch, who is the coordinator of drafting, and I, who am the coordinator of peer review, review it and then send it on to a peer reviewer. We encourage our peer reviewers to communicate directly with the drafters during the peer review process. So once we have an agreed product, we give it a final review, we post it on our website, and we then inform our outreach team that we have it and it's ready for them. So I want to stress the fact that at both the drafting stage and the peer review stage, we stress incorporating climate justice, environmental justice, energy justice in the proposals, as is recommended in the book. We welcome any ideas from peer reviewers or drafters to further enhance climate justice. And we also, encourage the listing of co-benefits that could be offered through the particular provision. So this is the language from our drafting protocol on that. We reach out to policymakers to try to ensure that there's a demand for the model laws. And that's something that you could also help us with. There we go. So here's a diagram of the outreach process. And we have a committee of volunteers who reach out. We're not lobbyists, but we have a committee of volunteer outreach people who reach out to legislators and policymakers to let them know what we're doing and find out what they would like us to do. Yeah, it's a two-way street. So today, more than 36 law firms and a large number of individual attorneys have participated as drafters. Here are some of the firms that are working with us or have worked with us, but there are many more. Some prefer to be to have their participation be anonymous to avoid client conflicts. So as I say, we have more than 65 model laws drafted so far, peer reviewed and posted on the website. We have had language we drafted incorporated into the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and we've had other successes as well. Although we have a large number of drafters and peer reviewers, we need more. 65 laws, there are 1,500 suggestions in the book. So there's plenty of room for you to come in and give us a hand, and we'll work with you all along the way. Law firms can get involved by taking responsibility for one or more recommendations to draft the model laws. They can provide supervision to law students who are doing drafting. They can peer review final model laws, and they can rely on relationships and contacts in state houses or federally to assist in outreach. Any of these things are things you could do as a peer reviewer. Some of our folks have done all three. I just want to answer some questions that Third Act has asked me to address very briefly here. There's no need for you to have an active law license to work on our projects. There's no need for you to be admitted to the bar in any particular jurisdiction. If your law firm desires a retainer agreement, we have a standard pro bono retainer agreement with the Sabin Center as the client. And as for the time commitment, obviously there's more if you are a drafter than if you are a peer reviewer or on the outreach team, but we will work with your schedule. We would love to have you. Please think about it and let us know. So thank you very much. That concludes my presentation. Here is my contact information. Feel free to contact me or just lpdd.org will give you the contact information for all of us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Well, I just can't thank you enough for the hard work that you're doing there on developing a whole new body of law. It is just fantastic. It reminds me, because I've been around for a few decades now, of the beginning of environmental law. It's just fabulous. And I just want to thank you so much. There was one question in the chat about the success of adopting some of the model laws and if you're keeping track of that.
We are keeping track, and you know, it's and we're working closely with legislative bodies. We do. I see another question about our model ordinances in the mix. You bet they are. Executive orders are in the mix. We're very flexible about this. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Khan. And now we'll move on to our next speaker from the Sabin Center. And we're really fortunate to have Matthew Eisenson. And he is a fellow with the Sabin Center. And he has a particular project that he's working on there called the Renewable Energy Legal Defense Initiative. Matthew, it's so wonderful to have you here. I just want to give a little bit about your background. You are a relatively recent graduate, 2015 from Yale Law School, but you also have this fabulous environmental experience before law school of working with the executive director of the Natural Resource Defense Council. So you've had this interest in protecting the environment for a while. And then you worked with the New York State Attorney General's office as well before coming to the Sabin Center. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for sharing your time with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, for the introduction. I'm going to share some slides if I can. You know what? I might have to share my entire desktop, which is strange. Let me see if I can avoid that. Okay. Can you see the presentation? So as Jane,
it looked fine, thank you.
Okay, great. So thanks again, Jane, and thank you to Third Act for having me. Matt Eisenson, I'm a fellow of the Sabin Center, and my project is our Renewable Energy Legal Defense Initiative. But first, to back up, you've heard a little bit about the Sabin Center, but there's just one thing I wanted to highlight. We're sometimes described as a think tank, but we're really a think and do tank. And the RELD is a really good example of that. RELD has a research component, and it also has a direct representation component. So on the research side, we work to identify legal obstacles to siting renewable energy facilities, mostly wind and solar so far, but we're starting to look at transmission too. So we look to identify obstacles and also develop strategies for getting around them, and also legal reform. So we have some overlap with LPDD. And then on the direct representation side, we support individual wind and solar projects and also transmission projects, primarily by filing amicus briefs. And we tend to represent individuals, including landowners, community groups, and occasionally local environmental groups who support bringing wind and solar projects into their communities. So RELDI is actually pretty unique within the environmental public interest space. Traditionally, environmental groups that wanted to be involved in public interest litigation were mostly focused on stopping bad things from happening, stopping pipelines, shutting down coal plants, holding polluters responsible, making them pay. At RELDI, our focus is really trying to help good things happen, which is pretty unique. And you might wonder, why now? Why haven't groups been doing this for a long time? The big environmental groups have been around since 1970, and a big reason is cost. The cost of wind and solar has just fallen so dramatically in the last 12 years that it's worth spending a few minutes talking about it. I have a couple slides here that are pulled from the investment bank Lazard does a levelized cost of carbon every few years. And this is their October 2021 report that looks at levelized cost of energy. And what that is the average cost of energy from construction through operation through decommissioning. And at the top here, you see the renewable energy sources. And at the bottom, you have conventional. And looking down from the top, you see rooftop solar still pretty expensive, community solar somewhere in the middle. Utility scale solar and wind are the cheapest form of energy now on a levelized basis, which is absolutely incredible. Cheaper than gas, coal, and nuclear. This has not always been the case. If we look at the next slide, you'll see how dramatic the change has been in just the last 12 years, 2009 to 2021, the unit cost of utility scale wind. And all of this, by the way, is without subsidies. The unit cost of wind has dropped 72% in 12 years. Solar dropped 90% in 12 years. So what all of this means is that wind and solar are cost competitive, and developers want to build it everywhere they can. And so developers are showing up in communities where they haven't built anything before, and where people aren't really used to having wind and solar projects. And this ranges from rural communities like rural Michigan, where they're used to coal plants, but not utility scale solar on farmland, to places like the Hamptons and Cape Cod, where people aren't used to seeing offshore turbines. So they're encountering a lot of opposition, these developers. And we released a report last year that looked at, it was a state-by-state catalog of local ordinances restricting wind and solar, and also individual projects that were being contested. And we found hundreds of ordinances that were extremely restrictive. And these range from temporary moratoria to outright bans. There are now a number of counties in Indiana and Ohio that have outright bans on utility scale wind or solar. And then there are what we call de facto bans, setback requirements of 3/4 of a mile. You can't build you essentially can't build a wind turbine in some jurisdictions unless you can site it more than 3/4 of a mile from the nearest property, which means you need a lot of land. So to give you a sense of the kinds of matters that we've taken on the direct representation side for RELDI, here are 3 examples. The first 2 are, they involve supporting individual projects, and the third involves supporting an important policy. So the first project that I want to highlight is we represented 2 farmers in Ohio who support a 300 megawatt onshore wind project. And these farmers plan to lease out their land to the developer, which will help them diversify their income. 300 megawatts is about enough energy to power 100,000 homes. The biggest nuclear plant in the country is about 10 times that big, but 300 megawatts is still a relatively big facility. So we represented them at the administrative level in front of the Ohio State Power Siting Board. And the standard there was, does this project advance the public interest? convenience and necessity. And these were great clients because we were able to show that they would get economic benefits, that the town would get economic benefits. And we emphasized both the economic and environmental benefits that the project would bring. The siting board granted the permit, the opponents appealed, and we filed a brief in the Ohio Supreme Court and are waiting for a decision. The second example is an offshore wind project. We have represented a local community group called Win with South Fork Wind, sometimes called Win with Wind, that was created for the purpose of supporting the South Fork wind project, a 130 megawatt offshore wind project, so about big enough to power 40,000 homes. The dispute in this case was very, very limited. It was about onshore transmission that the project needed. And the court ultimately agreed with our position that the onshore transmission was not a violation of the state equivalent of NEPA, SECRA, and the project got all the permissions it needed and has broken ground. The third example that I'll talk about really quickly is that we have been filing amicus briefs in support of the state's renewable energy siting regulations. So in 2020, New York, the state legislature passed a really important law that created a new state agency, the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, that is 100% focused on reviewing siting applications for wind and solar facilities. And as soon as the new agency promulgated regulations to start the process of reviewing these facilities, local opponents challenged the regulations. So we filed amicus briefs, both at the trial court level and now at the appellate court level, arguing that the regulations were promulgated in a legitimate manner. And the regulations were upheld at the trial court level, and we're waiting for a decision in the appellate court. So those are three examples of cases that we have been involved in litigating so far. I should mention that we don't initiate cases. We mostly file amicus briefs, but we occasionally intervene as well, especially at the siting board level. So in terms of matters where we could use volunteers, there are three RELD specific matters. Or types of work. One is helping us write letters to local governments opposing unlawful restrictions. And this is something that we've done a lot lately in Michigan. There has been this movement that's going town to town in Michigan, pushing the planning commissions to prohibit solar energy from agricultural land. And we've been writing letters to the towns explaining that doing this would be a violation of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act because it's exclusionary zoning. The second way to help would be direct representation, helping us with amicus briefs, and also serving as local counsel. I'm only admitted to practice in New York. So when we do litigation in other states, we always need local counsel. And for both of these matters, the way that we would, get started is I would take down your information, contact information, and where you're admitted, and then we would work together as cases arise. But it might not be as immediate as signing up to work on LPDD. The third item here, you wouldn't even need to be a lawyer. We're working on rebuttals to misinformation about renewables. We're trying to make these as academic as possible and credible. But it's something that comes up in every case, and also in all of our sort of pre-litigation matters where there's just a lot of misinformation at town meetings, and we're trying to pull together really strong rebuttals. The last matter that I'll mention, which is slightly outside of RELD, but another Sabin Center matter where my colleagues are looking for volunteers immediately, is with an energy insecurity initiative that's a collaboration with the Energy Bar Association, where they're looking to do a survey of state and local policies and programs related to utility disconnections, clean energy, energy efficiency, and low income assistance. So I'd be happy to follow up and talk with anybody who's interested about any of these ideas.
Thank you, Matt. There were a few questions in the chat. I don't know, Pat, do you want to direct Matt? Do we have time for
Oh.
that or not?
Actually, Matthew, if it's okay with you, we are running a little long, so we'll gather the questions and, maybe we'll be able to do some at the end, but we'll have some way of following up. And everybody, remember to save the chat, and we will be sending out a post-event email, which will have all the links. So next, we have Will Carroll, another Third Act Lawyers member, introducing the folks from oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. Lawyers for Good Government, of course. Yes, take it away, Will.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Yes, it's my pleasure today to introduce Jillian Blanchard, who will tell us about the valuable work being done by Lawyers for Good Government, along with some intriguing opportunities for Third Act lawyers to help out. Lawyers for Good Government is a community of 125,000 lawyers, law students, and activists. L4GG coordinates large-scale pro bono programs along with issue advocacy campaigns. Their current programs include the Climate Change and Environmental Justice Program, which tackles climate change by providing legal resources and services to governments, NGOs, and frontline communities. This program is led by Jillian Blanchard, an attorney with a national reputation in energy and natural resources law. Jillian has worked within government and in the nonprofit and private sectors on environmental and climate change issues for over 20 years. This includes a stint crafting Governor Gavin Newsom's climate change platform as part of his reelection campaign. We're very happy to have Jillian as part of our program today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jillian.
Thank you so much, Will. And thank you so much for having me. I am going to share my screen. Got a few slides to share with you all. And first, I just want to say that I'm so grateful to be here and very happy to be among this great group of passionate, knowledgeable brain trust that's probably on the phone today. So I really appreciate the opportunity. And I have to just say, it gives me hope for humanity. So with that, I want to tell you a bit about Lawyers for Good Government and the pro bono opportunities we have to get involved in climate change and environmental justice, which we view as two sides of the same coin, because you can't have climate solutions without climate justice. So as Will said, I'm Jillian Blanchard. I'm the director of the Climate Change Environmental Justice Program at Lawyers for Good Government. And given our time constraints, I'll be pretty quick in our intro. Okay, so as Will already said, we are a newer organization. We have, and yet we've grown to over 125,000 legal advocates. I can tell you that we were born literally on the eve of the 2016 election, when a lot of lawyers like yourselves realized that we were going to need to do quite a bit to protect the rule of law. So we have since grown to we're small but mighty in terms of our employees, and that we have 15 internally that manage this very large group of legal advocates. We've got 125,000 in all 50 states. And we work in areas where we believe lawyers can make a difference. So we work in areas of equal justice, environmental protection, human rights, racial justice, immigration and reproductive rights, and voting rights, all of which, as you've seen, are under attack. So as Bill mentioned and Matt mentioned, we essentially have, we're facing a climate catastrophe. I assume that's why many of you are on the phone, is because you care deeply about this issue. And we are at a pivotal moment in history where we really have less than a decade to make some significant changes in policy and direct action to tackle this monumental problem. So the way we formed our climate change and environmental justice program was actually on the day that the previous administration stated they were going to withdraw from the Paris Accord. And we decided, no, Lawyers for Good Government would step in and try and work with state and local governments to see how we could both meet and beat the Paris Accord commitments in the absence of federal leadership. And since 2017, our mission has grown and expanded to tackle the causes and effects of climate change by providing both legal resources for direct services and policy to states and local governments, NGOs, and frontline communities to expedite the shift to a just transition to a green economy. And so we directly address environmental racism as part of that effort, particularly focusing on those communities that have been disproportionately impacted by climate change. So to meet this mission, we've got 4, hopefully you'll find exciting key initiatives. We'd love to have you join us in this fight together on these initiatives. I'm going to talk a bit more about number 1, the Climate Funding Clinic, because that's a hot topic going on right now where we're looking for active volunteers. But we also have initiatives in disadvantaged communities research, right to water, and clean energy. So talking a bit about the funding clinic, we estimated that with the remaining American Rescue Plan funds, with Biden's infrastructure law, which I'm sure you're all been tracking, and the recent passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, those 3 laws together have the potential to be an historic investment in water, climate, and infrastructure in the amount of, believe it or not, potentially $2.2 trillion. That amount of money has the ability to, for the first time ever, tackle climate change head on and also address historic inequities. Likewise, it has the potential to just exacerbate those inequities if it's not implemented correctly and for ambitious climate projects. If it goes towards roads and bridges like it always has, this money will lead to historic inequities, will further divide communities, and will not address climate change. So we created the funding clinic essentially to help ensure that the money goes where it's needed most. So a significant chunk of that funding goes to states and local governments. And so the first piece of our funding clinic was in 2022, providing a number of webinar resources and guidelines and reports to state and local governments and communities about the distribution of funds, about federal funding streams under the Inflation Reduction Act, about Biden's infrastructure law and existing programs, new program guidance, and something that you may have heard of called Justice 40, which is Biden's executive order commitment that at least 40% of this historic investment in climate and water and infrastructure goes to benefit disadvantaged communities, which is one of the reasons why we've done so much significant disadvantaged communities research, is to try and make sure the money goes, again, where it's needed most. So in 2022, we focused high level. And in 2023, what we're doing under the funding clinic is providing direct pro bono legal resources to 15 to 20 disadvantaged communities on ambitious climate, resilience, and decarbonization and water projects. So we actually have an open call out right now with our applications pending, and we just received another one in today because there are a lot of communities in need. And we anticipate closing the application process on February 10th and formulating teams to assist those communities. So we welcome you to join our network of volunteers, and I'll give you some more information on how you can do that. The disadvantaged communities research I referenced, and then the right to water. You know, we at L4GG believe that as part of the impacts from climate change, the right to affordable and clean drinking water has never been more important. And so we provide, our initiative involves direct services as well as policy work at the state level. So we are currently providing some direct services to the residents of Benton Harbor who have been dealing with lead contamination in their drinking water for over 4 years, and our community of over 95% community of color. And then we're also working with our coalition partners in Michigan to establish some policies to ensure a clean, affordable drinking water for all of Michigan residents. So we plan on expanding that effort in 2023. And then finally, the clean energy is really just our work with local and state governments in answering their legal questions that we repeatedly get on different clean energy policies that they want to implement, whether it's climate action plans, whether they are able to legally as a city engage in a virtual power purchase agreement. So there's lots of unique and interesting assignments that come up under that initiative as well. So with that, I'm going to show you what our immediate volunteer needs are in case you're interested. And several of these you'll see they're related to the funding clinic because that is our main priority at the moment. So the first and foremost, if you want to join us and be one of our team members on the funding clinic to directly assist 15 to 20 overburdened communities, we'd love to have you, particularly those with a background in government, agency law, administrative law, regulatory, environmental, energy, water law. You do not need to hold a license to assist with this work. However, if you have a background in these particular areas, it's especially helpful. But I imagine we're going to get some requests for legal assistance that are going to run the gamut, from helping to draft an ordinance to implement a climate action plan, to assisting with identifying federal funding streams for a disadvantaged community for a particular ambitious climate project. So welcome your participation. You can sign up a number of different ways. You can always reach out to Pat and Seth and have them send your information along to me, or you can sign up directly through Lawyers for Your Government. You can see a live link here, and we'll send this, hopefully be able to send this link out and the slideshow after this by email to everyone, so you can take your time perusing the links and click on this volunteer interest form, where it'll ask you kind of where your jurisdictions may be, if you are licensed. If not, no worries, what your background might be, and importantly, what your interests are. What do you want to help us work on? So, and that can apply for any one of the volunteer options that I'm mentioning. The second big one is developing legal resources for clean energy and clean water projects. And that is going to involve a lot of probably like one-page technical resources that we're providing to folks, particularly now under the Inflation Reduction Act. Like, how do we get these tax credits for EV infrastructure? How can we apply for a grant under the energy efficiency program? Simple one-page legal resources that can be used by state government decision makers, local government decision makers, communities in particular who don't have resources to do this research themselves. And then number 3 is a kind of a smaller group, but if you have a background, you'd be welcome to join us. We are putting together a Inflation Reduction Act water-focused webinar for our coalition partners. So a lot of the assignments we get are from our fantastic nonprofit partners. Some of them are here on the call today, where they have a request for legal assistance that we can assist with. And so this one in particular was a request from NRDC and Earth Justice to put on a webinar to provide an overview on the water provisions that are in the Inflation Reduction Act, because it's not just a climate bill. It actually has a lot of interesting other provisions that can be expanded for water infrastructure and other equity funding. So those are the hot topics and volunteer needs that we have right now. But looking forward, we will have potential future needs within 2023 on our right to water work, both the direct assistance and state policy, as well as the ongoing local government requests we get from, again, analyzing whether it's legal to do a virtual power purchase agreement as a city in Indiana, to helping to draft an ordinance, things like that. So those will be ongoing. If they interest you, by all means, fill out the interest form, let us know what you're interested in, and then we'll be able to reach out to you when those volunteer opportunities come forward. And then the last one we've been working on and anticipate expanding in 2023 is our work with tribal nations. So we've written some legal memorandums on how to enforce tribal treaty rights in Wisconsin, and anticipate doing some more of that work in 2023. That'll probably be more like legal research, writing memos type work. So kind of reminiscent of your days as second and third year associates. If that's of interest to you, we would absolutely welcome, particularly with folks who have this level of experience, to join us. We have a lot in our network, and many of them are very, very passionate law students. So I would welcome the opportunity to work with some veterans, some expert volunteers who can give us some thoughts on how you want to see these things shaped and implemented. And with that, I want to leave you with this last page so you can learn a little bit more about our program. If you're interested, you can click on any of these links. They're live, and hopefully we'll be able to send them out after the presentation tonight. If you want an overview of the program, we've got that there. If you want to look at, learn more about our funding clinic and the open application that's out there, that's there as well. We also completed a 50-state disadvantaged community report where we analyzed the existing state and local policies in all 50 states, including Puerto Rico and DC, and presented that to over 700 different entities, state, local, community members who are now using it as part of their program. So we anticipate updating that report as well, if that interests you. Feel free to peruse that. All of our resources are free and feel free to share them widely. And then last, you can look at the funding webinars we did in 2022 and the existing legal resources that we produced, if that's of interest to you. And you can see kind of what work we've done to date. Again, would love to work with you all if anyone's interested, and we'll be happy to share out these live links and answer any questions that you may have when we have time at the end. So with that, I'll stop sharing and just say thanks again for your interest, your passion, and sharing your knowledge.
Jillian, thanks so much. That was a great presentation, and I'm sure that you're going to get lots of people inquiring about how they can help. Our last presenter is from Sierra Club, and they're going to be introduced by Bob Seng, another member of Third Act Lawyers. Yep.
There we go. Hi, Bob Seng. I am a Third Act lawyer, and Paul, yes, I am old enough to be a member of this group. Our next guests are from the Sierra Club, which needs no introduction. The guests themselves are Jeremy Fisher. He is a senior advisor for strategic research and development with the Sierra Club. He has a PhD in geological sciences from Brown University. Our second guest is Tony Mendoza, staff attorney at the Sierra Club. Tony holds undergraduate degrees in law, holds an undergraduate in law degree from Yale University. That notwithstanding, he is a human being who enjoys fly fishing for wild trout and salmon, bird watching, and playing soccer. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, and really a pleasure to be here. And both thanks for bearing with us, and thank you for your time ahead of this. I'm really excited to both have heard about these other initiatives and excited about the potential that we'll get a chance to work with some of you coming into this. I'm going to start off just by saying that there have been some really neat presentations and really neat opportunities that have been discussed this afternoon, this evening. And this one's going to sound potentially a little bit dry, but this is a fairly dire need, and there will be other opportunities that we can also extend out for our team. But I'm going to kick it over to Tony to get us started on this. I'm Jeremy Fisher. It'll be Tony Mendoza, and then we'll swap off as we go through this. And we'll be recognize that we're a little over on your time.
Next slide, Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind. So Sierra Club is, as we like to say, and I'm Tony Mendoza, and I am a staff attorney. And it's true that I do like to fly fish for trout. And I always say that once we end the burning of fossil fuels, I'm going to switch to river protection. But for now, we're focused on getting to a 100% clean economy. Sierra Club is, as we like to say, the nation's largest environmental grassroots organization, founded in 1898. We're a volunteer-driven organization. Jeremy and I are both housed within the environmental law program, which is essentially a medium-sized law firm within the larger Sierra Club organization. There's about 50 attorneys. Jeremy's not an attorney, but we also have technical experts like Jeremy who help us out. In 2021, we filed over 200 legal actions, and our practice spans federal, state, and local law. We are public utility experts. We're environmental law experts. We are unfortunately not federal tax experts. Next slide, please.
I think this is back to me. So we're focused here actually on the Inflation Reduction Act, or at least in this conversation. As Tony said, we do work at all levels of government. We have quite a few of our attorneys who are working on Public Utility Commission work, but the Inflation Reduction Act was a substantial change to the way that we're going to be doing work on a going forward basis, particularly just because it throws an extraordinary amount of money at the energy system in all sorts of different ways. And this is probably no new news to anyone who's on this call, but just broadly speaking, the Inflation Reduction Act opens broad new tax credits, a bunch in areas that have already existed, like wind and solar, but it ups and extends those credits, and then adds in storage and nuclear, and we all start getting things like hydrogen and carbon capture that have been relatively limited in the past in the Inflation Reduction Act. We get new changes to the way that those tax credits are getting rolled out for direct pay provisions that allow nonprofits to engage in a way that they previously haven't. Rebates and incentives and granting programs that come through other departments like EPA and USDA that just completely change the nature of the way that those organizations and agencies are going to interact with the electric sector and with the energy sector overall. Writ large, there are some incredible things within the Inflation Reduction Act that will need to get implemented and implemented properly. But as we sometimes like to say, well, actually, I don't think we actually say at Sierra Club, it's not really all sunshine and puppies. There are a couple of things that made their way into the Inflation Reduction Act that have some ambiguities in the text that we see as potential issues that Sierra Club is keeping its eyes on, and we could potentially use your help in looking at these a little bit more closely, and particularly if you're an attorney who has a background in tax law and policy, we're really looking for you to help step into this space to make sure that we're actually getting these tax credits rolling out in a way that's going to benefit the climate rather than going the other direction around. So the one that I'm going to talk about right over here that we're paying attention to, and this is not to say that we're not paying attention to many other things within the Act, but we're going to focus right now on these two because they're areas where we think we need some guardrails. The 45Q tax credit for carbon capture increased the value of capturing carbon from $50 a metric ton to $85 a ton, which is a substantial change, and it's actually sort of a magic number. This is a graphic that was put together by Great Plains Institute, who's been working on carbon capture and sequestration issues for a while. And what you see over there on the right side is that coal sort of has this magic number of between $45 to $60 per ton captured as an overall cost. The previous incentive that was made available wasn't quite enough to make it work. We weren't really seeing coal plants actually shifting over to doing carbon capture and sequestration. $85 per ton seems to be enough to be able to make that happen. So if this incentive was originally rolled out for the purposes of trying to help hard to decarbonize industrial carbon capture work, there's a real possibility that because it doesn't really have all that much differentiation where your carbon gets captured, it could end up spurring substantial investments in old coal, right? In some of these cases where you've got a large coal plant, you could end up with a multi-billion-dollar investment and multiple billions of dollars worth of taxpayer dollars that flow towards that if that's ultimately successful as a carbon capture project. But we're less concerned about whether we get successful carbon capture projects and more concerned about whether we get unsuccessful carbon capture projects, because under one interpretation of the statute, you could end up allowing for partial capture. And at coal plants that currently have relatively low utilization, you could actually end up in a circumstance where you have increased emissions at coal and gas plants being paid for by taxpayers under this fairly lucrative subsidy. There are also other problems that have been run into with carbon capture in the past, misreporting, there are concerns about liability for transportation and sequestration, and requirements for claimants, and just making sure that there's a really good tracking of where the carbon is actually going if it's going to get captured. So, from our perspective, there are reasons to be skeptical about this overall, but rather than looking at this as a attempt to turn the entire thing over, if we're going to actually have carbon capture and sequestration be part of our economy, it needs to actually accomplish what it's looking to do. So we are looking for support from attorneys who are interested in engaging in tax policy to engage directly with the IRS in trying to actually get some real guardrails in this space and make sure that this accomplishes what it's supposed to do and not accomplish what it's not supposed to do. Tony.
And then another section, and just to be clear, we are quite excited about the Inflation Reduction Act in general at Sierra Club and Jeremy and I specifically, but here we're talking about some of the things we're a little more worried about in the act. And so if you were watching Matthew's slides from the Sabin Center, you saw that wind and solar are by far our cheapest resources. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of wind and solar built over the next few years, and we need every bit of it. As you've probably heard, there are times when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. And so the trick in the clean energy transition is, well, what do we do for other energy needs that can't be met directly by solar and wind? And one solution potentially is hydrogen. And so the Inflation Reduction Act has a robust tax credit for the production of hydrogen, which when you burn hydrogen itself does not emit greenhouse gases. But the question is, how do you get the hydrogen? And so the act incentivizes essentially what we refer to as clean hydrogen, which is hydrogen that was made with very little carbon dioxide being released, or very little burning of a fossil fuel or use of a fossil fuel. And so what we want to do here is make sure that only developers who are generating actual clean hydrogen that is not making the situation worse are getting the credit. And so I don't know if you can see this chart here. The writing is a little small, but essentially the greenhouse gas impact, when you add up both the CO2 and the methane impact from what's referred to as gray hydrogen and blue hydrogen, are essentially comparable to just burning coal in a coal plant. And so there's no climate benefit if a developer can take advantage of the hydrogen tax credit just by using, say, electricity off the grid that's produced by a coal plant. And so what we need to do in comments to the IRS and in developing a new regulatory framework is developing a framework in which developers can build hydrogen generating projects, but only receive the credit if they can demonstrate that their processes are demonstrably clean. And I think this is an area that is new for the IRS. Certainly they are not hydrogen experts, and we at Sierra Club are not tax experts. And so what we're hoping to do is draft regulations, respond to requests for comments and things like that to help build this enforcement structure. Jeremy, anything you want to add about hydrogen, or we could go to the next slide, I think. Okay, and then we're here to ask you to come volunteer for Sierra Club. One thing I would say is, one data point I wanted to offer is that a University of Colorado professor did a study a few years ago about what factors were most likely to impact the retirement of a coal plant. And the number one factor was whether Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign had targeted that coal unit for retirement. And I mentioned that fact just to say, like, we're an effective organization. We need your help. We will do good with your help. And I should say also that we do tons of work that has nothing to do. In fact, almost all of our work is not federal tax law related. And we're always looking for lawyer volunteers who have federal or state legal experience, including to be local counsel and things like that. And so if you would like to volunteer for Sierra Club, but are not a tax expert, please still also reach out to us. And so thank you all.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop sharing, and I think we're heading into the next component.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And the next component is me wrapping up, and which is probably good news for everybody. It's been a wonderful almost hour and a half, but it has gone long. So we're happy to come to the end here. Just wanted to remind you that we concentrated tonight on volunteer opportunities in the climate space, but that is far from the only thing that Third Act Lawyers is going to be about. As I said in the chat in response to one question, we are limited only by our imaginations and by our ambitions and little things like, malpractice and rules of professional conduct. But other than that, we could do anything we want. Since we are going long, we're not going to take questions at this point, but I do want to thank all of our presenters, Matt, Marcy, Matthew, Jillian, Jeremy, and Tony, and all of our Third Act lawyer introducers, Jane, Will, and Bob. Always thanks to Hypatia, and always thanks to Bill. We have a slide to go up here in the end that has our contact on it, but it's real easy to remember. It's thirdactlawyers@gmail.com. So you can always write to us. We will be sending out following a post-event email that has all the links and all the presentations and ways to contact our presenters, but you can always reach out to us at that address, thirdactlawyers@gmail.com. Thanks again so much to everybody for being here, and have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.